This story begins with Zhao Gahui live streaming for his YouTube followers. The viewer count increased significantly, reaching 1,000, 2,000, and eventually reaching the number he had expected. He greeted his viewers at the top of a hill and asked them what he should do to make the live stream entertaining for everyone. 2 viewers suggested that he should try to conquer the martial world and create chaos. Zhao Gahui clasped his hands and introduced the martial TV to find the next person he wanted to record. We then transitioned to a scene in the real world, where a young man was messaging another about a new package that had arrived at the apartment with cameras for live streaming. The young man picked up the box and installed the necessary driver's computer, tried to turn on camera, but realized it wouldn't power on. So he checked his computer, seeing that it was properly connected, and tried to disconnect it to try another connection. As he touched the USB port, he was electrocuted to death. A few seconds after closing his eyes, he found himself in a strange dark room, watching the memories of his own life. He desperately cried out for his parents until a mysterious red light caught his attention, and when he turned, he saw it was the YouTube icon. He wondered what he was doing there, thought for a few seconds, and moved toward the YouTube icon, wishing to have a debut as a streamer and not such a ridiculous death. When he touched the icon, his body fell into a vortex, and he was reincarnated as a Chinese baby. He didn't understand what was happening, and the doctor handed the baby to his parents, who named him Huey. 6 years later, we see Zhao Gahui arriving at a food stall, where he meets Hang-Ah. The girls began to ask him various questions because he was an adorable child to them. Huey asked where his parents were, and Hang-Ah told him they had gone to check on the merchandise that had arrived. Huey thanked her and invited her to eat later, then said goodbye to them and went to the outskirts to sit and rest. He hated having to act like a child all the time, so he decided to check YouTube, taking advantage of the fact that his parents were out. They explained that because he died while holding the cable of his webcam, he can watch YouTube by closing his eyes as part of his ability. Huey also mentions that he was reincarnated as the only son of the Zhao family, a merchant clan in China. Judging by the upload dates of the videos on YouTube, the time in this world is the same as the original world. Since he died 6 years ago, it's likely that his family and girlfriend have forgotten about him. YouTube was very useful for him to adapt to his new lifestyle, as he learned Chinese that way and passed the time as he grew up as a baby. But the most useful thing he found on YouTube is that he could sense a person's scent in the recordings he made about their life. So, he used it to learn how to make soap in a time without technology, and was able to combat bad smells for 6 years. There were times when he didn't have enough materials to make soap, so he used his family's wealth. One day, he managed to make a soap entirely and gave it to his parents to sell, but they didn't believe that he could create it. Both parents whispered for a while, and the man commented that he had tried the soap, and it was of good quality. Normally, such soaps were expensive for peasants, but his soap, made from cheap ingredients and a simple manufacturing process, was valuable enough to revolutionize the entire soap industry. However, it was so valuable that they couldn't monopolize. His father mentioned that not many people would believe his story of accidentally creating such soap, and he was afraid that people with bad intentions would look for him to make money. But he clarified that he would seek help from the Zhuge clan, one of the 5 noble clans of the Martial Kingdom. In the evening, Huey asked Hang-Ah who the Zhuge clan was, and she asked him if he really didn't know about the alliance of the 10 sects and the 5 noble clans. The protagonist denied it, and Hang-Ah, not believing him, asked him about the Shaolin Temple, the Wuding sect, and the army. Huey continued to deny this, and she began to suspect him because she found it strange that a baby could speak, do tasks, and go to the bathroom without anyone teaching him. Nervously, Huey told her that he had learned all of that from other people, and no one had taught him about history. This excited Hang-Ah, and she told him everything about ancient China. There were people flying through the sky, some of them shooting plasma bursts from their hands. They were all masters of the 5 noble clans in martial arts. The next day, we see 2 people visiting the protagonist's family. He wondered if he could also learn these martial arts. The man greeted the protagonist's father, whose name was Zhao Yaohun. Zhao greeted Zhuge Shin and congratulated him on his reputation as the smiling Mr. Shin. Zhuge apologized to Zhao for visiting the family without notice, and Zhao introduced him to the rest of the family, asking Huey to say hello. The protagonist introduced himself, and Zhuge commented that he was the second child he had met who didn't have the eyes of an infant. Huey laughed awkwardly, not understanding what he meant. Shin introduced him to his 5-year-old niece, named Zhuge Wu Huey. Both the protagonist and Wu stared at each other. Zhao mentioned that he would talk to Shin and asked the protagonist to show Wu around the area. Huey accepted and extended his hand. She grabbed it, and Huey quickly showed her around, explaining the purpose of each area. Despite everything, the protagonist didn't feel like a 6-year-old but more like a 27-year-old. After the tour, he ran out of ideas and searched on YouTube for how to play with a 5-year-old. At that moment, Wu approached him and asked about his his soap-making equipment. Huey had forgotten to clean up, and he panicked. Wu smiled slightly and approached to inspect the equipment. She began to ask him several questions about how to use the tools. Huey denied knowing about them and told her they belonged to his father, and touching them could get him into trouble. Wu didn't believe him and asked if he wasn't telling her something. Huey remained firm in not telling her the truth, wondering how a child could be so aware of soap-making tools. She proposed a bet, where if he won, she would do whatever he wanted. Huey looked at her attentively and accepted the bet. Wu explained that they would make labels blindfolded and couldn't move out of the designated area. If they crossed the drawn line, they would lose. Huey accepted all the rules, and Wu played first. She blindfolded herself and concentrated, emitting a blue aura. Huey could see that aura, and he was surprised. Wu turned around and walked toward the protagonist, who couldn't believe she knew where he was. The protagonist tried to escape, but she caught him in a single step. Huey started running around the circle, trying not to be caught, but despite his efforts, Wu could predict his movements. Huey tried to jump to get away, but she cornered him near the line and managed to tag him with a sign near his neck. The protagonist got scared and stepped outside the circle. Wu started teasing him, and Huey asked her if she had superpowers. Wu denied knowing what a superpower was and blindfolded Huey. He deduced that the blue aura might be the martial arts Manhwa had mentioned. Huey decided to use his special ability, which was watching YouTube with his eyes closed. He activated the live streaming function, and every time he pressed the broadcast button, he could summon a webcam that only he could see. The camera could share everything it saw with him. He looked around until he found Wu, who was making gestures and dancing. Huey walked towards her, surprising her, and she wondered how he could find her. She started running away from the protagonist until she tripped on a stone. Wu saw that she had crossed the line and admitted her defeat. Huey helped her get up, but the upset girl pinched his cheeks, saying he had cheated because he could see. Huey replied that she was the one who blindfolded him, and he couldn't see. Wu stopped the punches she was throwing at him and said she just wanted to know about those tools. Huey looked at the things and asked Wu if she wanted to know what a slime monster was. After Zhuge and Zhao finished their meeting, they heard Wu's laugh. She was playing with the protagonist using slime. Xin looked at Wu and was surprised. She was controlled by the elders of the family and always hid her true self in front of others. But this time, she acted like a real child. Wu managed to catch the protagonist and was about to throw all the slime at Huey. Xin stopped her and told her they should leave. They both went to their carriage, and Zhao wished them a safe journey. Wu approached the protagonist and gave him a kiss on the cheek, saying it was fun to play with him and promising to visit him again. Huey asked his father if they had a good conversation about the miracle stone, and his father immediately scolded him. He said that Xin was from the Zhuge clan, absolute masters who had trained their Kai, and he should be aware of how he spoke and behaved with. Huey told him they were very far away, and he doubted they could hear them. Xin smiled slightly because this wasn't a typical conversation a father would have with his son. He considered the Zhao family a group with many talents and secrets, especially interesting from his perspective. Some time later, we see a group of people carrying various loads of the mystical soap created by the Zhuge clan. Thanks to this soap, the market is full of merchants and people talking about it. The Zhao family has also benefited from it and is just as busy as the Zhuge family. Two workers started to complain about their working conditions, and the protagonist's mother told Zhao that he should shut the workers up. After all, the contract with the Zhuge clan requires the Zhao family to keep this soap hidden, which is sold under the name of the Zhuge clan, when in reality, it is the Zhao family that handles everything. At that moment, Manhwa knocked on the door and asked for permission to enter. Zhao allowed her, and she introduced herself, asking what was needed. Zhao told her that the warrior escorts usually visit the Zhao family to ensure everything goes smoothly due to the contract with the Zhuge clan. Because of this, Wu visited the place every day, and it was clear that she liked Huey. So, he asked her to take care of both of them so they wouldn't get hurt. Manhwa accepted the mission, saying that they would calm down when they tried her snacks. Hang took a plate of food to the training area, surprised to see the protagonist and Wu about to fight. Both thanked her for the food, and without paying much attention, she initiated the fight between them. Huey lunged at Wu and attacked her with a punch. Wu managed to deflect it and quickly avoided the second attack, ducking to dodge Huey's kick and counterattack. The protagonist kept up with her, and both began to exchange blows evenly. Hang was surprised by what she saw to the point that she dropped her plate of food. She picked it up, put on 3D glasses to watch the fight. Wu landed a solid blow on Huey, who grabbed the girl's arm and threw her to the ground with a lock. She quickly reacted and grabbed him with the other arm, falling with him. However, the protagonist was the first to touch the ground, losing the fight. Wu mentioned that with that victory, they were now tied 50-50. She got up and asked him to train Kai. The protagonist asked why they should do it again, and she replied that the key to Kai was regular training and dragged him to train. Huey mentioned that she already knew it was useless, even after a month of training. training Kai in the village's martial hall. He had not accumulated a single drop of energy. Lately, he had been failing to learn how to gather Kai and had no talent for it. Wu told him that she could teach him much better than the city's martial hall. She asked him to recite the verses, and the protagonist did. Wu began to transfer her Kai to the protagonist. This opened Huey's Kai pores, and he began to feel the energy. He was surprised that he could finally cultivate using the Zhuge family's method. Huey got up, full of energy, but he knew he would run out of Kai all at once. She tried to encourage him, saying he could try, and if he did, he would become a universe. Huey left the training area, giving up on learning to cultivate, and Wu followed him, proposing to eat some sweets in the market. Hang followed the two of them to the village and stood in line to buy food. Wu told the protagonist that there were cases where martial artists acquired Kai at the age of 60 instead of at age 6. Huey asked if she was trying to console him, and she replied that she was, as she understood his feelings a bit. She explained that as a noble clan girl, inside or outside the house, everyone obeyed her words, but all she wanted was a friend to play with. Wu tried to say something, but she didn't have the courage and told him he should cheer up, swearing that she would teach him every day to use Kai until he was 60. After these words, she walked away, embarrassed, and Huey thought that he didn't care about having Kai. He cared more about having precious people around him in his new life. Wu bid farewell to the protagonist, and out of nowhere, a man emerged from the darkness, kidnapping the girl. The protagonist tried to do something, but he was also kidnapped, wondering if something like this was really happening in broad daylight. One of the kidnappers asked what they should do with the girl, and his companion replied that she didn't seem to be a servant, so it would be best to take her as well. Both dragged the children, and the protagonist asked for help until he fainted, but no one could hear him. Meanwhile, Hang was buying a lot of meat to prepare food and went to look for the kids. She was confused because she was sure she had sensed their presence playing. She noticed part of the protagonist's clothing on the ground and realized that he had been kidnapped. She quickly ran through the village, throwing things and shouting for Huey. Huey woke up and only saw darkness. He used his ability to look around with the camera. He realized he was inside a carriage, leaving the village, and wondered where they were going. He saw that Wu was trying to get out of the bag without success. The protagonist mentioned that before losing consciousness, he had dropped part of his clothing and wondered if she would be able to notice it. He didn't know what to do in this situation and used YouTube to find out how to free himself from the ropes. At night, the leader of the bandits asked one of them if they had confirmed that the protagonist was among the children. The bandit confirmed it, and the elder ordered them to take turns guarding the place until negotiations with the head of the Zhao family were completed. Huey sighed, as he knew that something like this would happen sooner or later. Wu asked the protagonist how he had managed to untie the ropes, and he replied that he would teach her later. But for now, they needed to escape. Huey suggested that they should pretend to be sick to get the door to open. Wu asked what they would do if they called someone else. The protagonist replied that they could escape while they were not there. The girl asked what they would do if the door turned out to be locked. Huey responded that they would escape through the window, but she mentioned that it was too high for both of them to escape. She asked if there was another way to escape, but the protagonist didn't know what to do. After a while, they were thinking of a way to escape, but they had an even bigger problem. They didn't know if they could face someone stronger than them in a real fight. They soon heard something approaching, and Wu asked what they should do. Huey told her they should tie themselves up again. A bandit entered the place and approached Wu, touching her face, saying he was not the patient type despite being ordered not to harm them. Wu freed herself from the ropes and threatened the bandit, saying that if he did anything, the leader of the Zhuge clan, Lord Chun Hyang, would appear. The bandit approached her, saying he was afraid of the Zhuge clan, but if he killed both of them, no one would be able to do anything about it. Huey took advantage of the conversation to kick the bandit in the testicles, and he screamed in pain. Quickly, Wu concentrated her Kai in her fist to punch the bandit in the face, breaking his teeth and knocking him to the ground. Huey took Wu's hand, saying it was the perfect time to escape. She warned him that the bandit was behind him. Before he could do anything, he was punched in the abdomen, throwing him against a stack of boxes. The bandit approached Wu, and the protagonist watched her being beaten. He tried to defend her, but fell to the ground. The bandit was about to finish Wu, and the protagonist prevented it by throwing stones at his head. This angered the man, who beat the protagonist severely, leaving him near death. Huey commented that he had the same feeling 6 years before he was reborn, the feeling of dying. He wondered how everything had escalated when he was laughing and talking with Wu in the morning. He didn't want to say goodbye to the people he cared about. If he died, he wanted to do it while saving Wu. He closed his eyes, and a YouTube notification appeared, telling him that the live streaming function had received an update. YouTube asked if he wanted to try the channel opening promotion feature. The protagonist asked asked YouTube to call someone who could help, and YouTube informed him that a person named Peepomi had joined. Huey began to see a lot of messages in the live chat, with people wondering why YouTube had recommended such a strange stream. The protagonist woke up amazed to be alive and realized that he was releasing a large amount of Kai. He quickly began to cultivate, remembering the explanations that Wu gave him about the 7 sacred stars. At that moment, he managed to unleash his power, catching the attention of the bandit who was concerned he had killed him. The bandit ran towards the protagonist to finish him off, but Huey managed to dodge the blows, predicting the movements with ease. When he saw the opportunity, he gave another kick to the bandit's testicles, taking the opportunity to continue hitting him in the genitals until he convulsed on the ground. Soon, he felt a strong pain in his body from using Kai, but he endured it as best as he could. He approached Wu, carrying her on his back, seeing that she was still okay. The protagonist left the place and fled into the forest, wondering why he now possessed Kai that he didn't have before. He questioned the relationship between the live stream and his Kai, or if it was just a coincidence. While he was pondering this, the bandit and his group appeared, demanding that they be captured. The entire group went to chase them with weapons, ready to kill them at that moment. Something cut the arm of one of the bandits, and the strongest bandit had his weapon broken and was cut in half. Huey noticed that it was Shin, who asked him to leave the rest to him, and he faced the group with his sword. The protagonist heard someone shout his name and turned around to see Hang-Ah and Wu's bodyguards. Huey was relieved that she had noticed the clothing he left behind. He couldn't endure the fatigue any longer and fell to the ground, losing consciousness. Later, the protagonist woke up in a room that seemed familiar to him. A girl approached, asking if he was awake, which scared Huey. He asked her if she was really Da-som, and she confirmed it. The protagonist, still disbelieving, touched her face. Da-som scolded him, saying that she had come to visit him and had to console her parents because he had died trying to set up a camera. Huey understood what was happening and commented that it was a relief to be able to say goodbye before returning to the other world. The protagonist revisited his memories, this time with his girlfriend, and woke up in his child's body. He was embraced by Hang and Wu, who were crying tears of happiness for him. He asked how long he had been asleep, and Wu answered that 2 days had passed. At that moment, Shin arrived and asked the protagonist to keep resting. He expressed his gratitude for saving Wu's life and thanked him on behalf of the entire clan. Shin asked Hang and Wu to go call a doctor, and they agreed. The elder remained with the protagonist. Shin asked the protagonist where he had learned the Zhuge clan's martial arts. This took Huey by surprise, and he panicked. Shin clarified that he didn't need to be afraid because, while caring for his internal injuries, he had checked his pulse. Despite being weak, there were traces of having used the Zhuge clan's internal technique. He mentioned that he wouldn't scold him for that but wanted to know which technique he had learned. Huey told him that he had used the heart-marked art of divine schemes. The protagonist asked if Wu had taught him a technique from the family that shouldn't be shown. Shin approached him, analyzing him, and mentioned that it depended on what he did from now on. The protagonist's parents entered the room, worried, and hugged him, relieved that he had recovered. In the afternoon, a doctor examined Huey and commented that there were no problems with his body, fortunately. He explained that thanks to Shin's help, the internal injuries were also healing, and he could get out of bed within the next 15 nights. The parents considered leaving Huey alone to rest. Wu approached the protagonist, saying that if he needed anything, he could call her. Huey lay down on the bed. Despite being unconscious for 2 days, his ability remained active. The Kai he felt in his stomach and the feelings it caused were real. He deduced that his Kai was due to a spectator entering his stream and wondered if he could keep the Kai active when there were no spectators. At that moment, YouTube informed him that the stream had ended. Huey decided to start another one and realized that the Kai had returned to his body. If he wanted to learn more about Kai, he had to maintain an active stream. Everything he gained in one stream would be preserved for the next, making him stronger. He waited for a while to confirm various theories and noticed that several spectators entered. This way, he confirmed that his Kai accumulated when he streamed. He tried to communicate with his viewers, but none of them understood him as he was speaking in Chinese. He decided to speak in his native language and explained his lifestyle to his viewers, observing how the number of viewers gradually increased. While the protagonist was busy talking to the viewers, a strange rumor spread within the Zhao family. The protagonist's father is worried because Huey is speaking in an unknown language that no one understands, and the servants have also heard him. The mother asked if it could be some kind of brain problem due to the blows he received, and the father wasn't sure, so he called the doctor again for another examination. Huey thought about explaining things before they could be misinterpreted. At that moment, Hang and Wu appeared, ready to perform an exorcism. Later, we see Huey gathering with everyone in the dining room, revealing to them all that he was able to awaken his Kai, clarifying that Shin already knew. This news shocked everyone, and they asked him when it happened. Huey thought of an explanation and said that that he learned it when he did a good deed for an elderly man in the village, and the man gifted him a secret martial arts book. He read it, and since then, he learned unknown words that surrounded his head. He explained that while he was desperate and about to die at the hands of the bandit group, those letters appeared. With just that thought, he was able to save Wu. Shin mentioned that he didn't expect a martial artist to appear in the village and saw the martial realm as something much larger. Although he and the protagonist knew that it was a lie, his story wasn't entirely false, as he did help an ordinary old man, but he never received a book from him. However, seeing their happy faces gave him reasons not to reveal the truth. Wu asked him the name of the martial art, and Huey told her that it was called the art of subscription. Wu mentioned that she had never heard of that martial art but congratulated him anyway. The protagonist's parents congratulated him for mastering a martial art different from the rest. Huey took the opportunity to ask Wu if they could now train together in the inner Kai. Sadly, she revealed that she would return to the clan. This news left Huey pale, not knowing what to do without her. We moved to a scene with Huey running to the bathroom and locking himself in, where he relaxed and wondered if he had turned off the stream. Upon opening YouTube, he realized that the viewers were watching everything. This worried the protagonist, who was unaware that this could happen. The viewers started to mock him, and he turned off the stream. He curled up in his room, wondering if Wu was okay. Then we see Wu and the protagonist saying goodbye. She told him that her father had ordered her to return to the clan immediately. Huey told her that her father was probably worried about everything that had just happened with the bandit group. She was scared and asked if she could skip that order. Huey mentioned that his parents were worried, so she should go and calm them down. However, he promised her that he would visit her next time. Wu asked if it was outside of Gacheng, and the protagonist's parents jokingly mentioned that there was no need to ruin the atmosphere. After this farewell, a month passed. During that time, Huey gained more experience by streaming and getting viewers every day. However, due to inevitable reasons, he received several YouTube strikes. This was due to the perspective of his webcam, which was in the first person. Because of this, viewers had seen various uncomfortable things many times. Despite that, he gained more viewers every day. He was happy because he could live his life by streaming, but despite that, he felt empty. Several days later, Huey walked in the courtyard of his house, saying aloud that he missed Wu. At that moment, Shin asked him if that was true, and the protagonist was startled and turned to look at him. The elder mentioned that he was passing through his family's lands due to various matters related to the miraculous rock and had something to give to him from Wu. Huey took the letter and read it, where she explained that she tried to send a letter to the Zhao house when she arrived at the clan, but her father intercepted the letter. Wu asked him if he could visit the clan's temple. Several days later, we see Huey doing a stream, where he explained to his viewers about the Zhuge clan. Shin approached a guard and introduced the protagonist, mentioning that he's the famous boy that Wu talks about so much. The guard began to laugh, revealing that Wu is head over heels in love with him, to the point where she seems possessed. Huey was scared by this, explaining that using the word possessed was very dangerous to say. Shin led the protagonist through the temple and told him that she had been proclaiming her romantic interest in him, so he was going to treat him casually from now on. But he needed to be careful about one thing. Huey asked what that was, and Shin mentioned that Wu's father had a special fondness for her because she's his only daughter among 3 sons. So, it was normal that he would treat her uniquely because she's the only girl. Huey told him it shouldn't be that serious, but Shin seriously told him that he would be willing to do anything to prevent him from seeing Wu. He might even test him, so he warned him to avoid any game with him where he had to demonstrate his talent, especially if it involved geomungo, go, calligraphy, or art. In the reception room of the Zhuge clan, they asked the protagonist if the food was to his liking, and he affirmed that it was. He started talking to his viewers, telling them about the unique flavors of the food. While chatting, a girl wondered what language Huey was speaking. He explained to her that it was a martial training he was doing and that she shouldn't worry. Then he asked the girl when he could see Wu, and she replied that she was very busy and needed to rest. She also advised him to do the same after the journey. At that moment, Huey remembered the words Shin had told him about Wu's father. The protagonist got up from his seat and left the place, seeing that the location had been transported to another world. He was confused because the place had been a normal reception before, and he wondered if it was one of those tests Shin had told him about. The girl insisted he should rest, and Huey asked her if this was some kind of formation. She congratulated him for figuring it out, explaining that the returning butterfly formation was precisely a space used to evacuate children, so there was nothing lethal in the area. So, it would take him a long time to cross this formation. Huey ran to a temple and tried to open the door. The girl warned him that it was impossible for a child to open it, so he couldn't do anything about it. Huey returned to her, and the young girl introduced introduced herself as the caretaker of the Jiang Formation. She was a master in that area. The master explained that she had orders to protect the Jiang Formation and not the protagonist. After saying this, she asked Huey to rest again, mentioning that she would make sure he saw the leader tomorrow. Huey smiled slightly because she wanted to test him, so he released his kai and asked if she wanted to make a bet. Meanwhile, a master entered the family patriarch's room, informing Wu's father that the protagonist had entered the butterfly formation. The patriarch started laughing, saying that he was too impatient and didn't deserve his daughter's hand. His name was Jujgi, and he was ready to make Huey suffer as punishment. Back with the protagonist, the master explained that the butterfly formation changed randomly every 2 hours, excluding the master. Finding an exit was possible for only a few people, even within the clan. It was a formation that even took her an hour to cross, so it was impossible for a child to make it. We see a scene of Gi, who commented that eventually Huey would ask his parents for help, and then he could leave. It was a perfect plan. Shin told him that he shouldn't do this kind of thing to a guest of the clan, and Gi scolded him, asking why he should accept someone like the protagonist into his clan. Shin mentioned that if Wu found out, she would hate him. Gi corrected him, saying that she would thank him. In the middle of the conversation, Wu appeared, asking if he had trapped Huey in the Jiang Formation. Gi tried to explain that he was inadequate for her and not worthy, but Wu ignored him, saying that if he got upset and wanted nothing to do with her, she would blame him for everything. A master entered the office, informing that Huey had already left the formation. Gi told Wu that the protagonist had probably given up and shouldn't be with someone without spirit. However, the master told him that he had escaped from the Jiang Formation with his eyes closed. This amazed Wu, whereas Gi was surprised but in a bad way, saying that it was impossible. The master explained that he could cross the illusory field with his eyes closed. Then they show that Huey had help from one of his viewers who was good with mazes and was giving him directions. Shin took the opportunity to defend the protagonist, saying that he's more amazing than he appears, and it's time for him and Wu to see each other. Gi tried to think of a countermeasure, but before he realized it, Huey had managed to infiltrate. He introduced himself and greeted the clan leader. The protagonist smiled at Gi, who fell silent. Huey asked Wu if she was okay, and she replied yes, expressing happiness that he had really come to visit her. Huey told her that he promised to, which upset Gi, and he scolded Wu, as he had forbidden her to act without his permission. Wu mentioned that he had forbidden her to leave the clan house, but she was still inside, so she could act freely. Gi was angered by his daughter's response, but before he could do anything, his wife appeared, asking Gi to stop sulking. She introduced herself as Nangong Jai Yak, Wu's mother, recognizing that her daughter was indebted to Huey for saving her and called him her hero. Huey greeted her and commented that she almost mistook her for Wu's older sister. Gi remained silent, listening to the conversation between the two, considering Huey as someone clever who could gain people's trust easily just by praising. Nangong apologized to the protagonist on Gi's behalf and asked him to enjoy the temple quiet. Huey told everyone that he had a question for Gi, and the latter was attentive to his request. Huey explained that he had heard various rumors about Gi's talent in strings, go, calligraphy, and art, especially when there was a bet involved. Gi asked him to get to the point, and the protagonist challenged him to one of those tests, astonishing everyone. Shin quickly tried to stop Huey, but Gi stepped forward and accepted the challenge, mentioning that a man lives and dies by his word. Gi told him there would be consequences if he lost. Huey explained that if he lost the bet, he wouldn't be able to approach Wu without permission. Wu scolded her dad for making a bet with a child, but Gi defended himself, saying that it was the protagonist who challenged him first, and as the clan leader, he couldn't refuse a guest's request. However, Huey clarified that if he won the bet, he could do whatever he wanted. Then we move to a scene of Huey playing Go with Gi, and the latter watched the protagonist's moves on the table closely. Soon the family started murmuring about Gi's plays, as it was the first time they had seen him lose at Go. Gi could handle the situation, but his biggest problem was that Huey was talking in the middle of the match. So, he asked what he was muttering about. The protagonist apologized, explaining that it was martial arts he had learned. Wu asked him how he had learned to play Go, and Huey replied that he had done it on his own. Gi got upset because Huey wasn't keeping quiet. Soon the viewers began to mock him for losing 14-2 against a child. Huey asked his viewers to type more slowly since he couldn't read Peepomi's strategies, who was telling him what moves to make. As a complete novice at Go, the only reason he could challenge Gi was that he could cheat using his viewers. One of the viewers entered an online Go game and copied exactly what Gi did in it. When the top level Go AI made its move, the viewer wrote their coordinates in the chat, a very simple method. He remembered which was the strongest Go bot when he was still alive, and it was easily defeating Gi, who was the strongest in the martial world. Huey saw the chat start moving quickly due to several comments talking about Nangong's beauty. He was about to lose for real if the chat continued like that. However, unexpectedly, Gi surrendered in front of his whole family. Both Shin and Nangong were surprised by what he said. Wu took the opportunity to hug the protagonist tightly. Gi, embarrassed, asked for one more game, but Nangong intervened, saying that the protagonist should rest. Gi refused, and an irritated Nangong stared at him attentively, scaring the patriarch, who allowed Huey to leave for now. Wu asked what happened to the promise, and Gi mentioned that he would keep it, so for now, he could go. Wu approached Huey to give him a kiss on the cheek. This annoyed Gi, who tried to stop them, but Shin and Nangong quickly restrained him. Now, thanks to the victory, Wu could visit the Zhao family again. The next day, we see Huey teaching Wu to speak his language. She asked people to subscribe to the protagonist's channel, which surprised Huey because the effects were greater than he expected. In this way, Huey spent time in a childlike manner with Wu. After 4 years, his 11th birthday arrived. It had been 11 years since he reincarnated in the Murim, so to entertain his viewers, he did a surprise unboxing of gifts. Huey started a live stream and showed his gifts, among which he showed a mirror he won in collaboration with the Juge clan. He looked at himself in the mirror to show his face to the viewers. One of the viewers asked if he was Huey. He affirmed it, and the comment clarified that he couldn't be him. The protagonist decided to ban the viewer for that comment, although his channel was flowing with content that positioned him as a popular YouTuber. In 4 years, his initial subscriber count of around 30 to 40 people had increased to 2,000. One of the problems was that many of them didn't understand Chinese, but the main issue was that he had to do something about the camera perspective. While discussing this, his viewers mentioned that he should check one of his previous streams since he had unintentionally captured a thief on video. The protagonist followed their advice and watched a viewer who asked him to slow down the video to 0.25. He saw an old man and a girl, and at that moment, she stole a bag from one of the merchants. Huey wondered how they could have captured something like that. However, he lost track of them quickly, as they were so fast that they moved beyond his Kai-trained eyes. This scared Huey because the viewers could barely see it. Later, he saw the old man's movement, which was even faster than the girl's. She would steal, and the old man would return the items. Later, Huey started another live stream where he explained everything that had happened as a show. While living peacefully one day, 2 mysterious people appeared who were stealing things. Huey went to the village accompanied by 2 Juge bodyguards. After the problem with the kidnappers, the clan assigned him escort warriors whenever he went out. Despite being strong enough now to face another in a fight, he accepted the help for his parents' peace of mind. While looking for the thieves, he casually spotted them from afar. Huey continued advancing towards the thieves discreetly. She took the opportunity to try to steal from him, but the protagonist turned in time and caught the hooded girl's hand. He let her go, saying she was a pretty girl. The old man interrupted their conversation and asked Huey if he could block his movements as well. The old man used a technique, extending his hand at great speed as if he were a monster. This scared Huey, and the bodyguard stood between them to block the blow. The protagonist was worried because the old man was much faster than in the video. The old man said he knew Huey had filled the bag with stones and deduced that he was looking for them. The bodyguard stopped him, and the old man apologized, as he didn't know that Huey was part of this huge clan, and then he left. The bodyguards explained to Huey that the old man was a master who was difficult to confront even if the entire clan fought. At night, the protagonist went to bed, and as he was about to end the stream, the old man appeared, scaring him. The old man mentioned that he had concealed his presence even when he was in front of him with his eyes closed. He was surprised that Huey could sense his presence. Huey asked if he was upset, and he replied yes, praising his skill. Since he couldn't sleep because of it, he had infiltrated his house while he was trying to sleep. He wanted to know what his relationship was with the Juge family. Huey didn't answer, and the old man introduced himself as the thief god. The master asked them to go outside, and the protagonist agreed. There, the old man began to inspect him and study him. He mentioned that he would give him a gift for surprising him that day and offered to turn him into his disciple. However, the training would last for 10 years under his care while they traveled. During that time, they would never be hit again. Huey told him he didn't share the desire, as he wanted to become strong to protect the people he cared about, not to steal. The old man began to laugh because he didn't expect that response. However, Huey mentioned that he could secretly visit him to train. The master refused, and Huey explained that he didn't want to abandon his family. The old man ended up giving him a book containing a technique called Shadow Lotus, a technique he created himself. He revealed that if he learned this technique before they could meet again, he would teach him more techniques in the future. Huey asked when that day would come, but the old man replied that it would be while they both remained alive. The next day, we see Huey investigating the thief god, who disappeared from the martial realm 10 years ago. Before that, he used used to steal from corrupt officials, bandits, and the unorthodox faction to share with the poor. People were divided on whether stealing to help others was truly just, but the protagonist judged by Hang's behavior, and he didn't seem like a bad person. Wu arrived in the protagonist's room. Huey was questioning whether it was a good idea to let the thief god go, but after seeing Wu, he thought he had made the right decision because he wanted to see her grow. However, he realized that she was upset. Wu asked him whom he was holding hands with. Huey tried to explain, but she wouldn't let him and scolded him. The protagonist showed her the book that the thief god had given him, and she quickly became happy. She asked where he got it, and Huey lied, as he didn't know how much it would affect them to know that he had met the thief god. Meanwhile, outside the protagonist's house, two people were prepared to infiltrate. During Wu Huey's training with Ga Huey, Hangen would appear with an attitude denoting anxiety and perhaps panic while shouting as if calling the young master, who lay on the ground while they applied a hold on. Upon noticing Hangen's presence, Wu Huey would ask about his intentions, primarily why he had gone to that place in such a hurry and excitement. Hangen would omit the strange scenario in front of his eyes, commenting that the master of the accumulated fist Yang was outside, being interrupted by Ga Huey when he was about to mention his intentions. The boy would inquire about the identity of the mentioned master, receiving a response from Wu Huey, mentioning that he is the master of hand-to-hand combat and someone important who once had power in the Shaanxi province. Wu Huey wondered why he was in the martial realm, as it was not common for him to enter this place. Ga Huey only asked to be released from the hold. During his freedom, Hangen would mention that the master's intentions were to stay with the Zhao family. Ga Huey, equally shocked as Wu Huey, would wonder if this was a new beginning, a comment that would make Wu Huey doubt its meaning. Back at the Zhao family's residence, the master of the accumulated fist would meet with the family's father, who asked why a nobleman of his status would stay with such a poor family. The master of the accumulated fist gave a somewhat unexpected answer, as his reason was directly linked to his daughter. After losing his wife 10 years ago, the master lost all motivation for heroism, admitting that if it weren't for his daughter, he would still be drinking and gambling. Later, his daughter, known as Yak Bin, would appear by his side, ready to greet the head of the family. On the other side of the door, Ga Huey would be close to it, intending to eavesdrop on their conversation and watch everything through the camera he had placed in the room. Thanks to this, he managed to see what the girl looked like, commenting that her appearance seemed familiar to him. In the conversation, the master would add that he had heard about the Zhao family and how they had saved various people, so he thought it would be a good place to entrust his daughter. This was because his daughter had to remain safe. He had also heard about Ga Huey and his abilities. When he mentioned that, the man somehow looked directly at the camera, which scared Ga Huey because that should be impossible, at least feeling his presence. After deciding to stay, Master Yang would show himself as a courteous and gentle person who, even during his free time, was willing to help the locals and make sure everything was in order. On the daughter's side, she would appear as a reserved and solitary girl, who even repeatedly rejected Ga Huey, even in the company of her little sister So Huey and Wu Huey. As the days passed, Ga Huey would be walking through the village as usual, but this time he would be interrupted by Master Yang, who was greeted by his escorts with formality. The latter would say that it was not necessary as he had left martial arts a long time ago. Ga Huey would give candies to the children in the area, and he would be praised by the Great Lord, saying that he was beloved by the children, but corrected by the latter about his true preference, which was candies. Subsequently, the Great Lord and the young master would sit down to talk for a while, during which the topic of his daughter's relationship with the young master would come up. The Great Lord would apologize for the girl's behavior, saying that it was his fault that she couldn't easily socialize with her peers. The young master would tell him not to worry, and the Lord would ask him to do his best to get closer to her, to which Ga Huey would respond affirmatively and enthusiastically, saying he would do his best to achieve it. Subsequently, we would see a training session between Ga Huey and Wu Huey, with the Great Lord and his daughter as spectators. The battle would reach quite intense points, with their exchanges of blows generating shockwaves that shook the area. In the climax of the fight, Ga Huey would appear exhausted due to the duration of the fight, and the damage received, being pushed to finish the fight with the next move. With this in mind, Ga Huey would charge against his opponent with the intention of hitting with all his strength right on his chin to knock him out. However, his move would be too predictable for Wu Huey, who would easily dodge it and then, with the force she had accumulated, deliver a powerful blow to her opponent. This blow would be directed right at his back, pushing him forward and rendering him unconscious as he hit the ground with all the momentum he had. This fight would surprise the Great Lord, who would notice how both fighters were battling as if it were a real fight and not just a training session. Subsequently, another fight would begin, this time seen from the perspective of the Great Lord Yang, who would praise the posture and skills of both young people, adding that they still had much to learn. At one point in the fight, the Great Lord would notice an opening that Ga Hui could exploit if he were smart enough to see it, indicating in his mind the right moment to make the move. At that moment, Ga Hui would do what the Great Lord had in mind, managing to take down Wu Hui, and using a hold, he would immobilize her on the ground. The fight would be stopped at that moment due to the action of rolling on the ground by Wu Hui and her opponent, which was considered a dishonor. Ga Hui would take the time to explain this event and its significance, apologizing later for what the Great Lord had witnessed. However, this was something that Wu Hui should already know, which would surprise her. Following this, the Great Lord would offer both young people his guidance in the martial realm, which Wu Hui would accept with an enthusiastic affirmative response from both. Ga Hui was relieved not to be scolded for his previous behavior. The Great Lord would address Wu Hui formally, and she would introduce herself by her full name, asking him to refer to her more comfortably using her colloquial name. He would again praise her skills, this time adding that it would be of great help for the girl to gain some experience in a real battle, as this would help her avoid movements like the one recently applied by the young master. Regarding Ga Hui, the Great Lord would add that the young man did not use proper martial arts. His fighting style was a set of simple but systematic movements. Subsequently, the Great Lord would correct the boy's posture, aligning his arms and legs correctly, and explaining the correct way to direct his Kai throughout his body. Once done, the boy would receive various instructions on managing his Kai, leading to a demonstration of his significantly increased strength with a couple of tips. When this was done, the spectators, including Wu Hui and himself, would be amazed at what he had achieved, as it was an unexpected and pleasant growth, especially in comparison to everything else. Wu Hui would thank the Great Lord for all his teachings and then take Ga Hui by the neck and bring him closer. She would mention the possibility that she had not only fixed his posture, but perhaps also taught him one of her combat secrets. After this event, several days would pass during which the Great Lord did not appear at the training ground, which puzzled Ga Hui. However, in his place, his daughter would speak briefly with Ga Hui. In response to his attitude, the young man would ask if he had done something wrong, proposing to start over with a friendly greeting. However, in the process, he would make fun of the girl, leading to a brief chase accompanied by insults. Afterward, the girl would stop in the midst of exhaustion and ask him if he wanted to be a disciple of her father, to which the boy would inquire if it was that obvious. Yak Bin would confirm that and encourage him to give it a try, which would delight Ga Hui, who took her hand and celebrated alongside her. Later, he would leaving behind a blushing Yak Bin, who had an embarrassed demeanor for reasons unknown until now. Some time later, during one night, Ga Hui would visit Great Lord Yang and his daughter, holding a gift for her father in his hands. It was a liquor that his father used to enjoy, according to Yak Bin's recommendations, making it the perfect gift for the Great Lord. The liquor was called Xifen, a very famous one in Shanks. After the Great Lord had tasted it and a few minutes had passed, Ga Hui would ask the Great Lord enthusiastically and respectfully to become his disciple. In response, the Great Lord would burst into laughter and admit that he had been hoping for something like that to happen. With some compliments in the midst of his analysis, everything seemed to indicate that the Great Lord would accept the young man's proposal. However, he would ask the young man to answer 3 questions, which were a requirement to determine if the boy deserved to be trained by him. First, he would ask if the boy was willing to practice with passion and heroism and never use his skills for heinous acts, to which Ga Hui would respond affirmatively. The second requirement was to train until exhaustion and never give up in the process, which Ga Hui would answer affirmatively. Finally, and with great enthusiasm, the Great Lord would ask the last question with a huge smile on his face, a somewhat different one from what he commonly displayed. The question would be if the boy was willing to jump into the endless flames of the Karma Inferno if his master decided to order it. This would confuse the boy, as he would be forced to seek advice from the audience, who told him that it was a completely serious proposition. The Great Lord would ask again what his answer was, to which Ga Hui would respond affirmatively, reasoning in his mind that it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The Great Lord would respond with pleasure, posing an additional question, which was to find out if the boy had practiced the Lotus Shadow Body technique that he claimed to have given, leading to a revelation. In the blink of an eye, the Great Lord's form would change as he was enveloped in a reddish and faint aura, now showing hair of a whitish tone and slightly darker skin, as well well as a different hairstyle. Upon turning around, it would be revealed that the Great Lord had been the thief god all along, whom Ga Hui had encountered some nights ago, in line with legends of his constant change in appearance. This also meant that the girl Ga Hui had stopped from robbing him earlier was Yak Bin, who happened to be the thief god's granddaughter, the latter stating that he had repeatedly asked her to change her form. Due to that comment, the girl would leave the room embarrassed, further confusing Ga Hui. Later, the old man would ask to conclude the conversation they had had 2 months ago during their encounter that night. The old man would admit that the boy's rejection had greatly hurt his pride, feeling the need to find him. In the midst of his thinking, he would try to use the identity he once had as the Great Lord of the Accumulated Fist, searching for his gloves to complete the disguise he had obtained thanks to the contortionist technique. Finally, after some time, the old man would realize that the boy, despite his quirks, was ready to be his disciple, which would make Ga Hui happy. After that, the conversation would turn into praise and teasing from both sides, creating a pleasant and picturesque atmosphere. The next day, the Accumulated Fist Lord Yang would be formally introduced as Ga Hui's master, a decision that the parents would gladly accept, encouraging their son to give his best. The master, now alone with his student, would explain that there was a possibility that someday, some enemies he had made with that identity might seek him out, putting the place in danger. Therefore, it would be his mission to maintain peace in the area. Ga Hui would nervously accept. Then, the old man would demonstrate how another head of himself was hidden in his costume, which would scare Ga Hui and disgust him a bit. Later, that head would be replaced by a blue squirrel, appearing cute in Ga Hui's eyes. This squirrel, being an animal raised by the Accumulated Fist Master, possessed outstanding abilities for its species. Its unparalleled speed allowed it to easily surpass the physical qualities of the best martial artists. Furthermore, he had developed his intellect to the point of being able to understand the human language, in addition to being intelligent enough to survive adverse situations. His name was Broly, or at least, that's the name his disciple and followers had assigned to him. Although you're probably wondering why they arrived at that name, a question posed by Ga Hui. The answer was simple. In a survey conducted on YouTube, Ga Hui's subscribers decided to name him Broly, surpassing the second option, which was Ramji, based on an old meme. This displeasure would be conveyed to his followers in the presence of his master, which would consequently pique the old man's curiosity, prompting him to inquire about what was bothering. Ga Hui would say that nothing was wrong, so the old man decided to skip that topic and focused on his disciple's decision on how to name the little squirrel. Ga Hui would try to impose his own name, but the subscribers would not allow it, reaffirming their authority. Finally, the boy would decide to name it Broly, which the master would take as Broly, saying it was a name with character. He would also mention that the little animal had been accompanying him and his granddaughter for quite some time, and yet they had never bothered to name it. He would add that Ga Hui spent all his time talking to himself and speaking in tongues or muttering things that he couldn't understand. To this, he would conclude his questioning by asking if the boy had any demands or conditions. The young master, with a nervous demeanor, would explain to his master about the subscription art, the excuse that Ga Hui had told his family years ago to justify the awakening of his Kai and his behavior. After the explanation, the master would advise his student to continue talking to himself, something that the boy said he would try, receiving somewhat humorous responses from his subscriber. Then, the master would ask the student to extend his hand for an examination, as he wanted to ensure that his disciple's body was in optimal condition. During the examination, the master would notice that not only was his body in good shape, but he possessed a very powerful and somehow fresh Kai, something the young master took as a compliment. To conclude, the master would provide a recommendation that the disciple continue to use his subscription art, as it apparently had a positive result. After this, the master would decide to end the conversation, moving on to training and demonstrating the Shadow Lotus body technique. With almost perfect execution, Hui managed to move at high speed behind his master, but he got distracted in the final stage of execution by some words from his friend Wu Hui. The master would say that his execution was almost perfect, except for some details. However, he would add that if Ga Hui continued as he had been, he would forever be in the shadow of Wu Hui, as she possessed a vision of things that placed her above her friend. Ga Hui would become depressed, but he would be quickly comforted by his master, who told him it was something he had already considered, saying he should prepare himself because his training so far had been child's play, and then he would leave. Once reunited with his friend Wu Hui, he would be lost in thought, ignoring his friend for a while until she threatened him if he didn't react. After this, she would invite him to train without waiting for her friend's rejection, as after being trained by his new master in their last conversation, he decided to fully focus on his personal training. His friend wouldn't be upset. encouraging him to do his best and to return to her when they were finished to show the results of his training. Both would make a pinky promise with smiles on their faces, which would be seen by Yak Bin. When the training time arrived, Yak Bin would be waiting for him, telling him that her master was drinking, so he wouldn't be training today. With some doubts about his life, Ga Hui would understand the situation. However, he would be interrupted by his friend, who asked to be called the older sister, causing confusion for the boy. In addition to this, she would say that she could help with the training while her expression showed confusion, which would confuse both the boy and his viewers. Later, we would see Ga Hui with his clothes removed, sitting on the ground while Yak Bin stared at him, accompanied by Wu Hui. Afterward, Hangen would arrive and be impressed by the situation, to which Ga Hui would respond that they were all family, so what they were seeing was not strange. Later, the girl would mention that she was there because some people had arrived talking about a martial arts academy, which would catch Ga Hui's attention. Later, after some time, representatives from the Nangong clan would visit the Zhao family, with the visitors being young Master Hyun and his parents. Due to the matters they would discuss, the Zhao leader would ask Young to escort Hyung and Ga Hui inside. Here, these two would have their first interaction, introducing themselves while casually talking about themselves. Later, Ga Hui would introduce his sister to Hyun, having a brief but pleasant interaction. It's also mentioned that the little girl would turn 6 years old soon. It would also be mentioned that the boy was Wu Hui's cousin, something we would know from a comment by Ga Hui while he was eavesdropping. In the conversation, we would see Wu Hui being somewhat annoying to her cousin, mentioning some atrocious acts he had committed against her years ago. She would also mention that with such a soft attitude, he wouldn't survive the martial arts academy. That name would sound again near the boy, so he would wonder if he would be capable of entering a place like that. The scene would change to one where we would see Yang talking to the leader of the Nangong clan, rejecting his offer to join the aforementioned academy. The insistence of the Nangong leader had a purpose because there was a growing issue that needed to be addressed in due time, so it was imperative to train the young ones. He would also ask for discretion, so Zhao and Yang promised to keep their lips sealed. On Yang's part, this was not fulfilled, as he shared the issue with his disciple. The dilemma consisted of the death of the previous leader of the demonic sect, Yun Jaichen, who had been peaceful, never causing any trouble for the other clans and remaining under the radar with his clan. However, the new leader was known for being violent and infamous, causing destruction wherever he went, earning the nickname 7000 Asura, a person who was not satisfied with his current power level. Due to this event, Ga Hui's peaceful life would change forever. The next day, Shin would arrive at the place, requesting a meeting with the clan leaders. The meeting would discuss the aforementioned situation, as well as the request to take Wu Hui with them, as she needed to attend the martial arts academy. In addition, it was imperative that she learned all the techniques belonging to her clan, which she hadn't been able to learn due to her absence from her respective home. However, Shin asked them not to feel guilty, as it was thanks to her being with the Zhao family that her smile never faded. In addition to allowing all descendants to learn the techniques of the various clans, the academy also aimed to unite all allies, thus forming bonds and ending the disputes that had divided the martial realm. When the day came for Wu Hui to leave with Shin, a perhaps predictable but unexpected request from Ga Hui was to participate and attend the martial arts academy. From his parents, he would receive advice and warnings because he needed to consider the rankings assigned in this place based on his level, as well as the possibility of only being allowed to contribute economically. However, Shin would chime in, saying that there would be no problem because, thanks to his training with the Grand Master of Accumulated Fists, the boy surely had a guaranteed spot at the academy. In addition, the parents would add some heartfelt words to the boy, saying that they would always worry about him and that he shouldn't think he would harm them by being absent. After this, Yak Bin would ask to join as well, which the Grand Master of Accumulated Fist would allow without any problem. Later, we would see Wu Hui and Ga Hui celebrating the fact that they could do this together, adding Yak Bin to their enthusiasm. This stage would end with a message from Ga Hui, saying that to meet again with Wu Hui, they had to be separated a second time. Then, we would be transported to a forest where we would see some animals, including a small caterpillar that would be eaten by a bird. Later, we would see an eagle, described as an imposing hunter, along with a brief description of the animal kingdom. This would be followed by an unexpected gale that would scare away the hunter. This gust of wind would be caused by Ga Hui, whom we would see much more grown compared to his previous appearance. It's at this moment that we would learn that 5 years had already passed since the last encounter, and he was now 17 years old. His change was not only in his physical appearance, as his skills had evolved to the point where his camera could now be moved in a radius of 200 meters, allowing him to capture better shots of his feet. In addition, his followers had increased significantly over the years, which helped boost his Kai. His channel would be renamed Martial TV. Later, Ga Hui would be shown heading to a small camp while carrying a boar to eat on his shoulders. He was awaited there by Yak Bin, who was lighting a campfire. Subsequently, everything would be grilled by Yak Bin, who would make some sarcastic comments about her culinary skills. On the teacher's part, who was sitting not far away, he would comment that recipes were unnecessary when you have alcohol, to which Ga Hui would respond regarding his drinking problem. He would reply that he should be left alone because it had been a long time since he could use his original appearance. Ga Hui would mention that his training had become much harder as he headed towards his admission to the martial arts academy, with his first test focusing on survival. During his training, the teacher would instruct them in various survival techniques, as well as hand-to-hand combat, disarming, and many aspects of martial arts in this area. He would also teach them how to pick locks and use techniques that could cause great pain to their opponents. All these techniques would be combined with modern martial arts that the boy had practiced vigorously, merging into a new type of martial art called the Fist of Subscription Art. Due to his rigorous training, the boy would lose track of time, eventually reaching the age of 17. Back at dinner, the teacher and his older sister would praise Huey's culinary skills, saying that the so-called soy stew was a perfect complement to the meat. The taste was so perfect for them that it couldn't even be compared to the food they had ever tried in the Central Palace, thanks to modern culinary techniques and recipes. Among all the talk, Huey would become interested in his stay in the Central Palace because it was an extremely dangerous place. This would be confirmed by the old man, who would admit to going there for some additional reasons, not forgetting to beat up the bad guys. The old man would continue to talk about his experience, asking Huey if he was interested in knowing what the Emperor was like. He would affirm, to which the old man would reply that when he saw him 10 years ago, he was almost 90, but he was still quite the ladies' man, as he had lost count of how many consorts he had and how many children he had. Yak Bin would only feel disgust at such behavior, while the boys would just laugh. Subsequently, it would be mentioned who his successor would be, which Huey would take as something really chaotic, referring to it as a fierce battle. The teacher would correct him, saying that it's really a bloodbath, getting lost in his thoughts. At that moment, he would apologize as he had gotten carried away, mentioning that it was during that time when he lost his son-in-law and daughter. After that, he had to take care of a baby at his advanced age, so he left the martial realm. After this, Yak Bin would mention that she was too young to remember something like that, so the topic didn't matter much. Even with that, Ga Hui would try to intervene, being interrupted by his teacher. Amidst laughter, he would say that he has a big heart. Subsequently, the topic would change, saying that the academy would be completed this year at the latest, so they would finish training after returning to the Zhao family. He would also tell them to practice on their own a bit, to which Yak Bin would try to encourage him to fight with an incentive based on his rivalry with Wu Huey, to which he would say it wasn't necessary. Subsequently, a bracelet on his arm would be shown, while the moon illuminated, and he would mention that he was happy to be able to see his friend again, looking forward to their reunion. Subsequently, we would be shown a flashback that would reveal the origin of that bracelet. Before going to train, Wu Huey would give Ga Hui a bracelet made of moon silk adorned with small beads in various colors ranging from red to blue. Moon silk was said to help clear the mind and aid in the learning of martial arts. Ga Hui would thank her as the girl had surely been busy with her training. Subsequently, she would ask him to put on her respective bracelet, which matched the boys, crossing their arms to view them from a better angle. Wu Huey would stop Ga Hui, who was about to speak, hugging him while asking him not to become more affectionate with Yak Bin than he was with her. In response, Ga Hui would wear a tired expression, and Wu Huey would ask him to seriously respond to her request, so the boy had to affirm that it wouldn't happen. Following this, the girl would try to kiss him while repeatedly calling him dear, to which the boy would move her away as this had already happened in the past. However, the girl would say that if this time he didn't let her kiss him, she would be very sad, so the boy reluctantly agreed. Afterward, Wu Huey told her beloved that he should never forget her, putting on a love-struck face while holding Ga Hui's hand. Back in the present, we would see Ga Hui giving a massage to the girl's father, who as usual displayed arrogant behavior. After the massage, the clan leader would praise Ga Hui's acupressure massage skill, saying he was very good at applying acupressure massage. They would also talk about his daughter, Wu Huey, mentioning that her training would apparently finish much later than expected. This was a pity because Ga Hui really hoped to see her. However, the clan leader would hand a package to young Ga Hui, saying that his daughter had left this for him to deliver. The package was a book containing some of the techniques they had both practiced when they were just children. Ga-Hui would show his gratitude upon receiving this gift, then bidding farewell to the leader. He would say it's because his friend is still training, so he couldn't afford to fall behind. He would then leave the room. By doing this, it would be revealed that Wu Hui was in the room while using what seemed to be a scroll that allowed her to become invisible. Subsequently, she would have a conversation with her father in which she would ask if her beloved Hui's longing was for a younger sister or a woman. The father would ask if it was infatuation, something the girl would respond to without the need for words, acting in a way that completely showed her love and affection for her beloved. The father would mention the bracelet or bangle on her wrist, something that his daughter didn't think he would remember. The father would say that if she didn't remember, it was because her eyes were nothing more than empty holes. He would also add that it would be better if she hid her wrists until the elders of her clan approved of her wearing, something the latter would not hear due to her constant thinking about her beloved. The next day, we would see Hui and Yak Bin in training with their teacher, who had prepared a test for them, one which, according to his words, would be similar to the first time they met. This would take place in a tavern, so a scolding from their disciples was to be expected. It was a search for 2 treasures, which would be divided by their students. They had to infiltrate a palace and find both treasures, something that didn't surprise Yak Bin much. She quickly moved to enter the place, saying that if Ga-Hui didn't hurry, she would end up with both treasures. That's how the search began, at the same time that the viewers watched in amazement. Some guards passed their control posts peacefully, while Yak Bin and Hui continued to move. The security was terrible, but they had to lower their guard. At that moment, a man would manage to detect Yak Bin, and she hid behind a wall. One of the guards mentioned that he was sure he had felt someone's kai. This man ordered the guards to check the perimeter again. Yak Bin analyzed the structure because the goal was the daughter's room. She deduced the likely location and infiltrated the building, managing to find the box. Yak Bin wondered if it wasn't strange that everything was too easy. She didn't know where the leader's daughter was, but things were going in her favor. Then, we see the princess being taken to her room to be with her bodyguard. Yak Bin had hidden inside the room's closet and was uncomfortable listening to everything. She tried to close the closet quietly but made noise unintentionally. The bodyguard noticed and approached quickly, catching Yak Bin. Hui used his camera for viewers to tell him which paths were clear or not. The protagonist managed to steal the box and wondered why Yak Bin was taking so long to find her treasure. Soon, he would hear her scream and saw that the guards were alarmed because they had been informed that an intruder was in the princess's room. This impressed Hui, who didn't expect her to fail in the infiltration. In the meantime, she was tied to a chair. The king asked his daughter if she was an assassin. The princess replied that she was, and the man decided to check the room to confirm that nothing had been stolen. The princess remembered that her bodyguard was hiding naked to avoid being caught, so she tried to stop him. The king entered the bathroom and found the bodyguard trying to escape. Everyone was impressed, except the king, who yelled angrily at the bodyguard. While everyone was distracted, the ropes that held Yak Bin captive were cut. The king noticed this, so when he turned around, he would see the protagonist carrying the girl. He greeted them and then jumped out of the window, while they tried to capture him. After a while, Yak Bin woke up and noticed that Hui was fleeing through the forest at high speed. She remembered everything she saw about the princess and felt uncomfortable. Hui told her to endure a bit longer because they needed to completely lose the group that was pursuing. At dawn, the thief god scolded Yak Bin because he believed she was superior in stealth to the protagonist. He mentioned that he wished to know how she failed so he could advise her. She didn't want to talk, so she asked Hui, but he also didn't know what happened. The thief god mentioned that they should maintain composure in all possible situations, as they could have died if it had been an infiltration with real combat. After this, he asked for the boxes they found, and Hui handed them over. The man examined them and pulled out a piece of armor. He explained that they were called the Black Shadow, armor pieces made from the scales of the black-scaled armored snake. He revealed that the craftsman who created the Black Shadow had also made the armor he was currently wearing. He mentioned that since the protagonist used bare-handed techniques, the Black Shadow armor fit him perfectly. The next item was the plum-pointed sword, a perfect weapon for Yak Bin, but since she failed, the protagonist kept it. Hui took it and decided to give it to Bin. The thief god mentioned that now they would search for a real treasure, so they would have to use all the techniques they had learned. And so, in the midst of enjoying the privilege of having the infamous thief god as their master, time passed quickly. Finally, the day came when they would leave the Academy of 1,000 Martial Arts. We see Hui saying goodbye to his family. His father asked him if he was forgetting something, which Huey denied. His father wished him luck on his journey to meet the protagonist. His worried mother told him to be careful and not hurt himself too much. Huey approached her, asking her not to worry, and gave her a hug. His father mentioned that he had a lot of trust in Huey and knew he was intelligent. They asked if he would visit the family on weekends. Huey explained that he was going to a place much farther than the mountain, so it would be very difficult to do so. However, he promised that he could visit them once every 2 months. So he started to cry, so to comfort her, he promised to visit them often. Huey said goodbye to his master. The latter was happy with what the protagonist had achieved, but he hoped that he would be able to use his fists as weapons when he started his real life as a martial artist. Because it was rare to do good deeds in the martial arts world or for them to lead to good results, Huey understood his message entirely with just a look. Huey traveled with Yak Bin, starting the long-awaited journey into the martial world. So, together with Bin, they ran off to begin their journey. In the forest at night, a wounded woman was fleeing from something. She sensed someone behind her and got scared that she had been found. This mysterious man drew his sword and attacked. One day earlier, we see Bin and Huey having dinner. He noticed that she was upset and asked her what was wrong. Bin mentioned that it had only been 5 days since they started their journey, and she didn't expect Huey to become such a popular man. Yak Bin suggested camping outside again. Huey was confused and reminded her that she was the one who said she didn't want to do it because she hated. Annoyed, Yak Bin asked him if he wanted to do it or not, but before the protagonist could answer, they were interrupted by the woman across from. She commented that it had been a long time since she had received the last response, so she had come to visit the protagonist on her own. She mentioned that she couldn't control her racing heart and asked Huey if he wanted to hear it from the protagonist himself. These comments left Yak Bin with a disgusted expression, and Huey, feeling uncomfortable, asked if she wanted a seat. She sat next to Bin and asked the protagonist if he was a traveler from far away. Nervously, he confirmed this and wanted to know why she was asking. The woman explained that not many handsome men usually came to the area. Huey thanked her for the compliment, and the woman asked him if he wanted to drink with her at night. He tried to respond, but Yak Bin interrupted, confronting the woman and saying that it would be very difficult because they were going to camp at night. Huey didn't understand the situation, but he played along and apologized to the woman. The woman didn't expect Yak Bin to intervene so boldly in her plan and mentioned that she would leave since it wasn't their fate to be involved today. She wished the protagonist good luck. Back in the present, Huey noticed that the woman had followed them and was desperately asking for help. Huey didn't understand what was happening or how everything had unfolded. The woman hugged him in fear, and at that moment, the assassin appeared, asking them not to interfere. Nervously, the protagonist tried to defuse the situation, but the assassin threatened to kill them if they interfered because it was their mission to eliminate the Crimson Witch. Huey didn't know who she was, and the assassin explained that she used the false body of an attractive woman, as she was actually over 40 years old. She often lured young and handsome men to their deaths after sleeping with them. The nervous woman asked them not to believe the assassin's story, and the assassin drew her sword. She mentioned that she collected the medals of the men she killed, and if they were going to defend her, she was willing to safely neutralize the witch to prove the truth of her story. She also explained that she planned to kidnap them and hold them as hostages, so they should slowly move away. The desperate woman said she could go visit other martial artists if necessary. Huey sighed and proposed to the assassin to let the witch go with other martial artists to confirm the story, as he didn't want to interfere in such a complicated situation. Yak Bin scolded the protagonist for making that decision, but the witch thanked him. However, Huey coldly touched her shoulder, saying that was the furthest he could go to help her. He had realized that the story was true and used a technique to knock the witch down. As she fell to the ground, the protagonist took all the medals she had collected from other men she had killed. Huey told the assassin that apparently there was no need to confirm the story with other martial artists. The assassin smiled in surprise and sheathed her sword. The upset witch mentioned that the protagonist had too mischievous a heart to deceive her that way, being so young. Huey asked her if that deception compared to all the lives she had taken until now. After these words, he threw all the medals in her face, confidently telling the witch not to trust compassionate martial artists without reason, as it was a saying in the martial world. The assassin thanked the protagonist for his help, tied up the witch, and asked Huey how he was able to tell that she was lying. Huey replied that someone facing injustice would want to escape suspicion as soon as possible, and not stall for time like she did. Although the words spoken by the protagonist were a lie, as he could only confirm it using his camera, the assassin decided to remove his hat and introduced himself as Byoklayo Gun. Huey looked at her in amazement, as she was someone beautiful, and his first fateful encounter in the martial world was his first encounter with someone like her. And that's how the first part of this manhwa ends. If you have reached this part of the video, let me tell you that you have been one of the few people to make it here. So comment the word streamer in the comments. Remember to subscribe to not miss any videos. With that said, see you in the next video.